welcome back to the Boropolis podcast. As usual, I am joined with Nathan, and well, we've got a bit of a marathon episode to go today. 2 games, a game to preview. We're getting into the real thick of it, of the festive football period, and I just want to get into it. Before we do, though, how's your week been? And also, for those of you that are listening that live in the Teesside area, I don't know where people are listening from, but if you aren't aware, Teesside had a momentous occasion this weekend. It was this weekend, I think. The opening of Stack last night. I know you were in there, Nathan. Out of 10, and also just a little bit of a review of the place.
Yeah, I've had a pretty good week, Chris. Some people will be able to tell I have got a little bit of a cold. I think most people do
Yeah.
at this moment in time. It's that time of year where
Half the Boro squad do, don't they?
yeah, everyone's getting struck down with some sort of festive flu, I think they're calling it. But yeah, other than that, I'm all right. And yes, I was in the Stack last night. It opened last Tuesday, which was a bit of a weird time to open it. But
Yeah.
anyway, first weekend of it being open, Boro win on the Saturday afternoon, straight into Stack. Place was bouncing, heaving, queue out the door for most of the evening. Just, yeah, really, really nice to see a venue be introduced to the town and give us something to actually go out for in Middlesbrough town centre.
Listen, I won't have a bad word said about flares, so it's nice to have an option, I suppose, rather than just piling into Pop World at like 9:30 and then just seeing the rest of the night out in there. But yeah, I'm. Do you know what? Obviously, geographically, I'm not there every weekend, but I, I'm sure over the festive period that me and you will hopefully creep in there for 1 or 2 beers at some point. We'll try and get that arranged. But yes, Nathan, as I was rambling on about at the beginning of the podcast, we obviously had Leeds on Tuesday night, which was shite to to put it in the most obvious way possible. And then, of course, we had Millwall yesterday. And of course, to be honest, following the back end of last week's podcast, we talked about everything that Millwall are going to be about, everything that they always have been about. And then midway through the week, you get the news that actually Millwall is going to be Neil Harris's last game. So it wasn't quite the new manager bounce, but you had that sort of added little bit of context that just makes you think prime suspect for Middlesbrough to go and giving away side a 1-0 scruffy win. And actually it was sort of the other way around. So of course, going chronologically, we do unfortunately have to talk about that Leeds performance. So just in terms of the team, we've just touched on it there. Following on from Burnley, there was a couple of changes. Dale come out the team. I think there was talk in the pre-match press conference that there was a little bit of illness rolling on, and even going into yesterday, it sounds like there was as well. But Dale was one of the casualties of the old Boro flu, the festive flu. He come out for Clarkey. Dyke Steele kept his place. We also saw Della come out the team for Riley McGree. And then, as predicted from the pair of us, we saw the introduction of Emmanuel Latte-Laff, who took the place of Tommy Conway. Overall, no real shocks in that team, to be honest. And to be honest, going into the game, and it's not like me at all, I had a weird, and nothing behind this, I had a real weird sort of sense that we were going to win the game. I mean, straight back down to earth really, really quickly, as is what usually happens at Leeds. But we spoke about it yesterday. We spoke about it last week. We spoke about it in the build up to the game. When you go to Ellen Road, the challenge is just hold as much as you can in the positions that you were in and just hold off from going 1-0 down. Try and stay in the game. Try not to basically be a rabbit in the headlights for the first 10-15 minutes. Let the atmosphere cool down a little bit and then start to play your own game. I mean, Middlesbrough did exactly the opposite of that, didn't they?
Yeah, we got swallowed up well and truly. It was always going to be the case, as you say, when you go to Welling Road. as a team where there's always a little bit of needle in the games with Leeds, always has been, and with the atmosphere there, you have to weather the storm, and we didn't do that at all, and that sort of stemmed from mainly, and I think we'll probably talk about it in a little bit more depth, but our midfield just got absolutely ran all over, really. We talked about last week, Barlas are playing pretty well in the Burnley game, and that was because their midfield didn't press them as much as a Blackburn did in that game a couple of weeks ago. Barlasser obviously came into the team against Oxford, and in games like that, when you're playing teams that are just the sort of lower teams in the division, he'll have a field day because they're not going to go anywhere near him, and he can just play at his own pace, really. Whereas Leeds aren't going to let you do that, and he's not going to change his ways. They pressed him, took the ball off him on numerous occasions. Barlasser played a couple of passes in the opening sort of 10,
Yeah,
15 minutes
I know
that
exactly which one you're going to talk about. It almost set the tone for the remainder of the night, didn't it? I think it got played into him, rolled into him from the centre off. He went to play back to Clark, left-footed pass, and I think he does it 3 times on the night. And this isn't just a hammering of down ball asset. We'll get on to Hayden Hackney as well. But like you were just going to touch on, kind of just try and weather the storm for the first 10 minutes. Dan Barlasser tries to roll one back with his left foot and basically puts them through on goal within about 10 minutes, doesn't he?
just so poor. Like it's a case of don't give anything away in the opening sort of 15, 20 minutes, and they haven't carved you open. You're giving them opportunities for free, and it's just not how you need to be going about things. And we spoke about like the atmosphere at Ellen Road, and sometimes that can get on top of players. These players have played at Ellen Road last season. Barlasser played at Ellen Road last season for us and made a mistake to give one of the goals away last season. And in this game again, just lost the midfield battle against Tanaka and Rothwell. Tanaka was fantastic on the night. I think he only really got robbed possession maybe once or twice, but just kept things ticking over. When he was pressed, he did well to be able to shift the ball away or drive forward. Yeah, their midfield was just everything that ours wasn't on the night. Hackney, his second game in a space of a couple of days that was not at his best again sloppy passes going astray, picking the wrong passes at times, picking the wrong decisions to take shots from 25 yards and put them over the bar rather than just keeping possession, retaining possession, and trying to recycle it and create chances through going wide. Yeah, the top and bottom of it is we just weren't good enough on the night. We couldn't get our attacking players in the game. Look, Azaz, we'll get onto Millwall as well. Has pretty much an off night against Leeds, and then yesterday afternoon didn't think he was at his best. Still comes away with an assist yesterday, mind. But yeah, couldn't get our attacking players in the game. McGree was yeah, it was. I thought last week when we spoke about it, I thought that the game would have suited Bergzorg a little bit more with it being quite open, but he opted with McGree. We'll get on to the incident in the first half after Leeds opened the scoring, but yeah, we just didn't have enough to get our attacking players in the game.
I
Yeah,
think I think just in terms of your point there, in terms of not being able to get our attacking players in our players that can hurt teams, on the ball. Like you said, it was a different, obviously the different midfielders, but sloppy would be the word I would use for both of them. But there was almost elements of Hackney's performance where you were seeing the Hayden Hackney that we all know and expect. He picks up the ball, drives through midfield, and then so many times he actually kind of done the hard part, and then just his final pass or his decision or just delaying or basically just making the wrong decision. It seemed to just be every kind of time that he had the ball. And look, I'm fully aware that, midfielders have off days, but I think you saw there, well, two things. I think you saw the obvious quality of Leeds' midfield. Like you say, I thought Tanaka was probably, other than Dan James, the best player on the pitch. Just not even necessarily doing anything absolutely sort of jaw-dropping by any means, but just so clever with making the correct decision, making the correct runs, knowing when to press and when to sit off, and just not losing the ball, keeping things ticking. And actually, in terms of the other point I was going to make, his excellent performance just made me miss Aidan Morris, because Aidan Morris, there hasn't really, in fairness, since his injury, there hasn't been that much of an outcry in terms of, yes, of course, we all miss him, but there hasn't been an obvious game where you've gone, God, we missed Aidan Morris. I think that game on Tuesday night was the first real time where I thought, yeah, we really, really, really do miss him. And just everything that he brings is his dogged approach, his tenacity, and just like Tanaka, his ability to just keep things ticking. Not necessarily Hollywood balls, but just keeping the ball moving, like you say, recycling possession, and just not kind of making silly decisions that are ultimately going to put us under even more pressure than the atmosphere already puts you under. And yeah, it wasn't a great performance. We'll talk about kind of other aspects of the performance. I did touch on Dan James there, and I thought he was one of the brightest kind of lights for Leeds. I also thought that Neto Borges allowed him to do so on the night. Now, funnily enough, we spoke, or specifically you actually spoke about kind of, although they weren't playing directly against each other, but the battle on the night of kind of Doak versus Dan James. And quite frustratingly for Middlesbrough and Doak, there was an obvious winner on the night. Dan James was, I mean, it wasn't quite Lucas Engel away at Sheffield Wednesday, but Neto Borges looked just like he wanted the ground to swallow him up.
Yeah, yeah. The first goal obviously comes down that side. The pass just takes Borges out the game. He's all over the place really with his positioning. James has obviously darted in behind with his electric pace. Borges sort of looks to try and cut the ball out, but then realizes he can't get there, stops and just does nothing really. James then obviously drives up the line, crosses the ball in, and it's a strange one. It's a very strange goal, and we spoke about it last week about Seny Dieng and these fluke goals, and there's only so many that can go in where you think they look like flukes, but are they actually, or is this just poor goalkeeping? And yeah, the cross comes in, obviously takes a couple of deflections on its way through, one off Clark, who's sliding across, and one off Edmondson and Joseph at the front post. Dieng is sort of wrong-footed because of those and falls backwards after making the save rather than onto his side. And obviously then he's laid on his back, tries to kick the ball away and just kicks it into Nanto, and it's a goal. And you have a long sort of mountain to climb from that point, really going 1-0 down in 15 minutes. They were right on top of us. They were putting balls in the box like that James delivery from pretty much minute two. And yeah, they just sort of got right on top of us, were laying it on, and we couldn't deal with it until pretty much that goal went in. The goal went in and it settled us down actually. It was
Yeah, yeah,
silly.
yeah. Strangely enough, it really was. And look, I'm sure we'll probably get onto the goalkeeper topic, obviously, when we move on to Millwall, and the fact that, ultimately, it, you could probably say that Leeds opener is cost Seny Dieng's place in this Middlesbrough team. And like you say, exactly what you touched on last week, really. There's only so many goals that you can look at and think, well, there's obvious points that you can pick at from a goalkeeper's perspective, but there's other things that come into the play. There's the conditions at Burnley, or there's the fact that in the Norwich game, the cross that kind of goes in, initially he makes a good save to keep it out at his near post, and then the Leeds goal, it's actually not a bad save initially, but then his reaction is just, I don't know. It looks unnatural. Look, I'm no goalkeeping expert, but do you want him to be in a different starting position, which means that he doesn't end up kind of on his back, hopelessly kind of just flinging his legs about, hoping to get a clearance on the ball? It's not convincing. And as you say, unfortunately, as much as I think each of the goals, there's probably an argument for both in terms of it's not an absolute howler where someone's had a crap shot and he could have thrown his hat on in it and he spilt it, or it's gone through his legs or something like that. But ultimately, yeah, I think, to be honest, it's a it's a pattern that has slowly emerged, and I still, to be honest, it creates another conversation about the fact, was Carrick right to put Dieng back into the team in the first place? And to be honest, I still think he was correct to do so. I still fully am on the side of Senny Dieng going into the Burnley game, given that Solbrin had been good, but not amazing by any stretch. Competent, I think. There was a few goals that we conceded during that period which weren't necessarily howlers at all. Not really any major question marks, but he did okay. Pretty good. Dieng, though, those two performances, yeah, like ultimately, like we say, there's two goals there in the course of two games that have lost him his place in the team. And as good as his distribution can be, and as much as he knows the way we play, there's probably an argument where, in terms of, sometimes we don't seem to utilize it, and or it's certainly not kind of as obvious as when we used to do it, where the likes of Stefan or Dieng would just literally put the foot on the ball and wait for pressure. We don't seem to do it as much anymore in terms of drawing teams in, but Dieng knows that way of playing inside out. To be honest, though, like we said, it's a cliche one, but goalkeepers are in your team to prevent goals from going in, and Dieng was, as I say, that pattern was emerging and continuing, and who knows kind of what might have happened yesterday if he was kept in the team. But yeah, I said we'd move on to it, and then kind of coincided with a little 5 minute conversation about him. So we probably don't need to move on to that discussion later on now. But yeah, as you were going to touch on, Nathan, originally, cross into the box, Joe Rodon tries to clear it, kicks the back of Riley McGree's boot. For me, I mean, you text me at half time. Of course, you were in the stadium. I had the benefit, as I usually do, of watching it from the sofa and getting multiple angles and replays. It's a penalty for me. I'm sure you've seen the replays back now, but it's one of those. If VAR is in the Premier League, it's a penalty.
Yeah, it is. Good ball from Azaz, and it sort of has Rodon in no man's land, really. He has to try and make an attempt to clear the ball, and instead, McGree nicks in front of him. And yeah, plain and simple as that, he kicks the back of McGree's leg after McGree's already touched the ball. Pen, done. That's how it should be. But it's a funny one. Like we weren't good enough on the night for anything really from the game, but that could possibly change it in the fact that, okay, we struggled to get into the game early on, but at 1-0 down, you get a penalty, you get back into the game, you grow into the game, and all of a sudden you rock Leeds a little bit, and you don't know how that can change the momentum in the game. But the referee doesn't give it, whether that's just because he misses it and he's incompetent and his linesman is, and also because it's at Leeds and it's at Ellen Road and he's shit himself. I don't quite know, but it's a penalty all day for me. I felt that we grew into the game well from that point, as I mentioned, conceding the goal, get that potential penalty, go into half time 1-0 down, not the worst thing in the world.
I think, to be honest, I felt going in at half time, I almost breathed a sigh of relief. I felt quite happy that we hadn't gone in 2-0 down or 3-0 down. And don't get me wrong, after the initial opener, I do think you're right. I think we improved, and it strangely enough settled us down a little bit. But going into the second half, or going in at half time rather, I did think, right, okay, they probably can't go into the second half and play worse than they have in the first. And that was kind of the positive I had going into the second half. I thought, just in terms of the overall game, I know we spoke about Dan James and the fact that ultimately he won the kind of the battle of the right wingers, or the battle of the wide men on the night. I thought one one thing I seen at half time, actually, which would be interesting. I haven't spoken to you about this, but there was an awful lot of criticism for Verba, the left back, who, as we said last week, is a centre half by trade, playing left back, playing up against Doak, and actually, I don't think he coped with him too bad. I think perhaps more so Doak, end product, kept on chopping inside, and probably not so much being as direct as what we've seen of him in previous games. But yeah, there was an awful lot of criticism for Leeds' left back, and I actually thought that he was doing okay. And it wasn't even like he was just kind of, chucking aside his attacking responsibilities. He was getting forward, and it didn't quite look as obvious as a centre half playing left back against a winger that was just skinning him every time. Perhaps that was just because we weren't getting enough of the ball and getting it out to Dork enough, but it was certainly an avenue where, look, I know we have the big chance at 1-1 with Dork, but it wasn't an avenue all night, and even going into yesterday, too quiet a games from Ben Doak, and it does probably, you do look at it and think perhaps through everything that we discussed in terms of Ben Doak being a wonderful footballer, and I'm not disputing that he's not, but the rest of the division have kind of woken up to exactly what he has and how much of Middlesbrough's attack goes through the right as well.
which is fine, but you have to find other avenues
Yeah,
of creating chances. If you're going to have Dork on that side and have two players or one player man mark him, then you have to find ways to sort of use that to your advantage, and there'll be space either in behind if Dork comes short, or space to drive into if Dork makes a run up the line. So yeah, I actually thought that Verba didn't do too bad, as you mentioned. I thought that maybe some of the criticism in for him was probably down to the fact that he was playing very high at times. And what I did notice was, even though he is a centre half, he was hugging the touchline a lot and letting Nonto invert, like sort of like we do, I suppose. Yeah, maybe that opened up the avenues for Dork in the couple of occasions in the first half when he was set free. Verba was out of position, leaving Dork alone really to be able to drive forward. Maybe that was sort of their point. But yeah, I felt that going in the second half, we came out the traps quite well and had the better of things in the opening 10-15 minutes of the second half. And obviously, on the one occasion, carved them open, play the pass into McGree, and he gets a shot off, tests Melier, who makes a good save at his near post, which gets us the corner in which we scored the equaliser. At the time, I couldn't tell how it had gone in, whether it was Barlas who had swung it in and it had just gone all the way through, or Borges, or anything. I didn't have a clue, because I thought that the celebration was incredibly sort of strange from our lot. Barlas has stood in the same position. Only Borges went over to him, and the rest of the players walked back to the halfway line as if the goal was offside. I just thought, what on earth's gone on? But back in it, thought, well, now it makes it interesting. We just can't commit professional suicide by playing out from the back and giving them opportunities. Oh, wait, we did.
and in fairness, we did. But even before then, as I say, Doak has the chance at 1-1 where his first touch lets him down. And it's probably the one opportunity where Doak gets, and still a part of his game that, we're all aware of, and we're not using it as a stick to beat him with at all. But his end product in terms of not so much his crossing, but his shooting and his finishing ability still probably quite a way to go with that. His first touch, he lets him down, and he kind of like prods it towards Meslier. And it's a shame because I actually don't rate Meslier at all. And you know what? We didn't really work him at all night. And you've seen, I mean, you saw yesterday even, if you get shots in at him, he literally, well, I mean, we've spoken about our goalkeepers. He is not a good goalkeeper. He is consistently one that will parry shots or spill things and cause problems for Leeds. But anyway, it's something that didn't happen, so it's pointless dwelling on it. Yeah, as you say, we had a let off just minutes before the goal actually goes in. I think Barlasser gives it away again, and Dan James breaks. And to be fair, doesn't really get much on his shot. Dieng gets down and makes an okay save. And then literally minutes later, I think, I can't actually remember who fizzes it into McGree. And Byram just basically smashes through the back of him. It's not a foul. He meets the ball and he's aggressive in his tackle, goes and wins it. It comes back out of Leeds. Again, Neto's committed, and I mean, you can't even afford to kind of get in a foot race with Dan James if you've given yourself a 5-yard head start. So you stand absolutely no chance if he's already got 5 yards on you. Neto Borges is so far out of position, but he's caught, and Dan James doesn't make the same mistake twice. He goes through and smashes it in the top corner. And as we say, story of the night, Dan James, yeah, he is someone that has found his end product this season, and it's been a question of him. Of course, he's a lot further in his development than what Ben Doak is by all accounts. But yeah, it's a great finish, and I think, to be honest, though, you look at it again, and it's a goal where Boro shot themselves in the foot. As much as Leeds were dangerous on the night, they didn't create a bucket load of chances. We created quite a few chances for them, and ultimately they punished us.
Yeah, I thought that this one in particular, obviously the tackle's a fantastic tackle from Byram and it lands at the feet of Perot. But what I do notice is as Byram is flying into the tackle, the reaction of James versus Borges, which is as Byram's flying in to make that tackle,
Yeah,
James is already darting forward, and Borges is sort of his head doesn't sort of react quick enough to what is actually going on. And yeah, James is already on his way at that point. Perot slips him in, and it's a fantastic finish. In fairness to him, having watched it back on replays, there's no chance for any goalkeeper. It's right in the top corner. Yeah, absolute killer, really, to concede it in the way that you do. But
I think
yeah,
actually the goal, to be honest, again it's our downfall, and again it's us that have, it's a really crap goal to concede. But I thought that goal, it almost felt like an absolute mountain to climb to get back to 1-1. And that just absolutely took the stuffing out of us. As soon as that second had gone in, I was kind of almost acceptant of the fact that we weren't going to get back into the game for a second time. And I thought after that point, to be honest, it was just a case of Borough tried, didn't really create anything of note. And it was more so at that point where I began to be frustrated because a lot of the attacks, again, just done the hard part, kind of got past a midfielder or got past a fullback, and then just didn't really pick the right pass or choose the right option or get a shot off. And a lot of it, to be fair, was coming through Hayden Hackney. But ultimately, like I said in the kind of top end of when we were discussing the game, often he'd do the hard part and beat the initial press and then go to kind of make a pass or take a shot on and just get it wrong, unfortunately. But yeah, the third one, to be honest, I must say, the man that gives it away, George Edmondson, we're chasing the game at that point. Honestly, it didn't bother me at all. The game was done and dusted at that point for me. We weren't going to create anything, and we certainly weren't going to score a late equaliser. Edmondson all night, I thought, saved us on multiple occasions. Probably only one of maybe two that could come out of that game with any kind of slither of credit. The amount of times that he put his head in the way of a shot, or made a tackle, or just headed away a clearance or a corner. Yeah, I thought George Edmondson was really good on the night. And ultimately, in this case, he tried to zip a pass into midfield. It gets cut out. They commit bodies forward. And yeah, I think it's Aronson that ends up tapping it in. Look, they beat us on the night. Middlesbrough beat themselves on the night, I feel more so would be a better way of describing it. Don't get me wrong. I think Leeds are the best side in this division. They have the best squad in this division. But ultimately, I didn't come away from the game thinking, well, they've carved us open on multiple occasions. I just thought there's just a little gap in quality where, and look, I'm not going to put it down to kind of one or two players, but you think of, and to be fair, he doesn't even play on the night, but Tanaka, if we have Morris in, it's a very different side and a very different performance, I think. And then even Vandenberg or Fry, I think we spoke about it yesterday. I personally think Clark and Edmondson are probably too similar to play together. And actually, it's a strange one because Clark should give you the balance of a left footer playing on the left-hand side. And obviously, Edmondson's naturally right-footed. So you get the benefit of that. But other than that, I think they're too similar. I think they are very much defenders in the mould of their bread and butter is throwing their bodies on the line and basically going and putting the head and the body in places where it's going to hurt to prevent goals. Dale Fry's good at that. I think his reading of the game is a lot better. Obviously, Rav Vandenberg's the jewel in the crown in the defence. I mean, in the whole club, really, in fairness. But I think in future, it will be Edmondson and one other when available, because I just think that pair, there was a few occasions where, because Leeds can spring on you, felt a little bit flat-footed. And I want to use the phrase again, to be honest, and it's not just those two, because I thought Edmondson, like I say, saved us on a few occasions, or quite a few occasions actually, but the whole performance in general felt a little bit rabbit in headlights, that we almost, and it seems like a bit of a cop-out me saying this, but the whole performance felt like we just shit ourselves a little bit, like, oh, we're at Ellen Road, you know, the atmosphere is quite intimidating, and this sloppiness crept in, this kind of just not the Middlesbrough side that we've seen over the last few weeks. And I thought we've kind of got past that point, but we almost reverted and kind of fell into our shells. I thought, in hindsight, of course, it's a beautiful thing. Perhaps a little bit of inexperience, a little bit of naivety crept into the performance. We spoke about it yesterday. Could perhaps have Luke Ayling been a good idea to be in that team? And look, it would have been incredibly harsh on Anthony Dijksteel after his performance at Burnley. But in terms of knowing the atmosphere, knowing the crowd, knowing when to go down and pretend that you're injured or tie your laces, and just basically calm things down a little bit. As much as, yes, you can't account for the centre midfielder passing it straight to the number 10 and gifting chances to Leeds, what you can account for is just being a little bit streetwise and not basically, for want of a better word, crapping yourselves in moments where you just need to settle things down a little bit.
Yeah, I'd agree. I think that opening 20 minutes showed me everything that I needed to know, really. And that's the frustrating part. The fact that me as a fan going there knows that is what's going to happen. You're going to go and they're going to try and get on top of you from minute one, and you have to weather the storm. We've had it over the years where Michael Carrick sides have been to places like this. Yeah, we just melted a little bit in those opening 20 minutes, and yeah, it was the first time in quite a long time that I thought this side had a little bit of a soft centre to sort of melt in the way that it did in those opening 20 minutes. And I know it's easy me saying this, but there's no need to panic. We have good players. These players need to trust themselves more. We know that they're good players and they can handle themselves in atmospheres like that. They've done it earlier on in the season. But yeah, just a little bit frustrating that we couldn't sort of handle ourselves the way that we wanted to. We couldn't get to grips with things. But I think there was a lot of sort of frustration on social media after the game. Obviously, 1 point from six out of Burnley and Leeds, and a lot of that was sort of, well, we had chances at Burnley to win that game. So if you pick 3 from 6, then it's not as bad. But I think on the whole, if you look at those two games in isolation and you think, right, the Burnley game, okay, probably could have nicked it. You'd have been happy with a point beforehand. It's a little bit frustrating. And if that doesn't get followed up by Leeds, where you're probably just second best on the night, I think that's fair to say, okay, we gave them a couple of opportunities that we wouldn't have liked to, but they were the better side. I thought they defended really well on the night as
Yeah,
well. Cut out a lot of our through passes that we'd usually sort of be able to make and take chances from. I think that just they were the better side. And if you take those games in isolation and you moved that Leeds game to, I don't know, October, and then you had the Burnley game, you wouldn't necessarily see those as bad as if they
yeah,
were followed back to back. And
yeah,
it's just how it's happened with the fixture list. What was important after those two games is you just get back to picking up a massive, important 3 points. And that's what we did yesterday against
yeah.
Millwall. We knew that it was going to be a tough game, a tough nut to crack. We opened them up with a through pass that if you're playing that against Leeds, it might not get through with their defenders.
It's a slightly different opposition when
Yeah,
you've got Lailaf running in behind against Murray Wallace or Joe Roden.
yeah,
I mean, to be fair, or Rodon, however you want to pronounce it, as much as at times he's one of those players opposition wise that you just can't bear. He's a little bit of a passion merchant. He's a really good centre half at this level. Let's not kid ourselves. There's a reason that I think ultimately it was part of a swap deal, but for the best kind of part of about 15 million quid, I think he ends up going back there. Could have gone and got himself a Premier League move quite easily, I'm pretty sure, and didn't, opted to go back to there. So fair play to him. But yeah, like you say, it's a different opposition entirely, competing against Leeds to that of Murray Wallace, who, I mean, really, look, I'm sure he really does not care about my opinion on him. He's a professional footballer that's had a great career at Millwall, but for the most part, I look at him as a rugby player. Just in terms of, before we do move on to Millwall, two things I want to touch on. Firstly, conversation around Carrick and his reactive rather than proactive substitutions again. We yet again had to wait until the 80th minute for a substitution after ultimately the game's taken away from us. Is that something that you would feel? I don't think ultimately it's cost us, but you'd hope that perhaps we give them, because to be fair, after the equaliser, I think second half we probably had about a 15-minute spell, if that, where we were probably, you could say that we were on top. During that, are you hoping that Michael Carrick makes a change or tries to freshen things up just to get that little bit more joy? Perhaps McGree, who, as much as a bigger fan of him as I am, massively ineffective on the night. Do you put Bergsorg on and try and give them something different to deal with and just be a little bit more brave? Look, I'm not sure, because maybe he puts Bergsorg on and we get caught on the counter and the same thing happens. But certainly a question to be asked, because I think I touched on it a few podcasts ago that as much as Carrick's got many, 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 many ticks in his kind of managerial CV, there is one cross still against his name where I think he is very much reactive instead of proactive when it comes to substitutions, and he does get it wrong an awful lot in terms of when he's making those subs.
You can't change a game with 10 minutes to go. This isn't that Sir Alex Ferguson juju bullshit of concede a 97th minute goal just because it's play until Man United score. It's not the same thing. It's just not going to happen. So yeah, I'd say that you'd argue that change should be made earlier on. I would have liked Bergzorg on it. Yeah, as pretty much minutes after as you go 1-1. But yeah, it wasn't to be. And then throwing, it's just panic from 80 minutes onwards. Take a Zaz off, throw Conway on with 5 minutes to go, and put him in the 10, although he's blatantly not a 10. He's not a withdrawn striker. We discussed this weeks ago when that sort of experiment came up again. It's not happening. And you can tell Conway doesn't fancy it there as
No,
well.
no, he doesn't. And do you know what? In fairness to him, as a substitution in his kind of first couple of appearances, he actually looked, I don't want to say at home, but looked better in that role, looked bright. I think in terms of attacking wise, we were that bad in the first few games that actually it was just his general enthusiasm, which probably kidded not only myself, a few others that thought, oh, I tell you what, this could be the return of kind of a 9.5 Tuba and Archer style partnership. But no, I think you're right. I think, look, I'm not going to get drawn on that conversation. It's definitely one or the other in terms of as number nines with I was about to say Archer and Akpom there. They are long gone with Latiolaf and Conway. And just in terms of a wider point, I know you spoke about the reaction and kind of how the fixture list is basically, stuck the middle finger up to us a little bit on these last few games because of the fact that in isolation it's not a bad point at Burnley, and then you follow it up with a defeat, and it kind of just, you look at the league table, you look at the teams winning in and around us, and you think, well, it's 1 point out of a possible 6, and a load of teams have made up a load of ground on us. I thought the reaction was a little bit strange after the Leeds game, I must say. And not so much in terms of the performance. I completely understood all of the frustration. I was really frustrated with the way we performed. We gifted them their goals. We crapped ourselves. And yeah, it wasn't a good performance by any stretch. However, I just want to get your take on the conversation around, well, Leeds are Leeds and they've got an unbelievable squad. It's the same with Burnley and Sheffield United. We would count ourselves lucky to even have a patch on some of the squad and players that they have available to themselves. That they're almost in a different kind of league of their own to what Middlesbrough are. I'd just like to take everyone that's listening and yourself, Nathan, back to the beginning of the season. And don't get me wrong, I was never under the assumption at all that Middlesbrough were going to go and walk this league or get automatic promotion. However, there was a reason why the bookies had Middlesbrough as the third favourite for this division. It's not because Middlesbrough over the last few years or over the last decade or whatever have, been in the Premier League, or over the last 20 years have been in Europe and been in cup finals. It's because we've assembled a really, really good championship squad with almost 2 good players in every single position. Now, Leeds, I'd probably say, do you know what? They've got some terrific players and they've got some really good options throughout the squad. Absolutely fine with that. I think by far, not by far and away, but considerably probably the best squad. And I would expect them to go and win this league, hands down. But then bringing Sheffield United and Burnley into this equation. Now, don't get me wrong. Again, I'm going to kind of almost set my stall out in terms of where I stand. Burnley have got some really good players. Sheffield United have got some of the best players in this division in their starting 11. And in terms of their starting 11, definitely amongst the top 2 or 3 starting 11s in the division. Absolutely, Gustavo Hamer. I mean, even the goalkeeper that they've brought in from Plymouth, Cooper, his record of clean sheets at Bramall Lane this season is extraordinary. Vinny Souza is a Premier League midfielder. But can we just kind of have a discussion about why everyone's banging on about their squads in general?
Yeah,
Starting 11, yes, but squad-wise, I'm sorry, I'm just going to pull up Sheffield United's bench from
that's
yesterday.
fine. That's fine. I've already got it up for you.
Andre Brooks, young player, potential, but would you swap him out for anyone on Middlesbrough's bench? Reece Norrington Davies, experienced player by all accounts, but would he get into Middlesbrough's squad? Jamal Baptiste, I've got to be honest, don't know an awful lot about him. Adam Davies is a backup goalkeeper. Jamie Shackleton wouldn't get on our bench.
No.
Kiefer Moore scored his second goal of the season yesterday from a penalty. As a plan C, maybe, in this Middlesbrough squad, would you take him? Yeah, probably, to lug balls up to in the last 10 minutes of games if we're chasing games. Ryan Brewster scores his first goal the other night after literally about 4 years of not scoring a goal in professional football. Sam McCallum, I mean, left back, granted, we're not blessed with left backs at all, so you'd probably say, yeah, he'd be in and around the squad. But this whole conversation around, or revisionism around that Middlesbrough should never have been anywhere near the top two and they can't possibly challenge these absolute super teams and super squads in the Championship. I'm not having it one bit, Nathan. It's absolute nonsense.
Yeah, Ryan won up front yesterday for Sheffield United. Tom Davies in midfield, who's obviously injured a lot of the time. I mean, even you can go into the actual squad. Jack Robinson is shit. Is shit. I'm not having it. He's awful. But I could sort of understand the point. Not on Sheffield United at all. Their squad is not a patch on ours. I think that a team, yeah, they've got a really, really sort of good 11 on the pitch that evidently can match pretty much every team in the division. That look, they've lost 2 games all season to us and Leeds,
Yeah.
both back to back. In fairness, you talk about like our results to Burnley and Leeds there, and we pick up 1 point. They pick up 0 from Leeds and us, both away from home. There's no panic. They go on a run of winning games and games and games and games, and they find themselves top of the league. So that's a separate point on the point of not panicking. But Burnley as well, I remember being sat there first weekend of the season thinking, yeah, they are your league winners because of the first day of the season, they had Darrell O'Shea playing at centre half, no longer with them. Vitinho, no longer with them, scored on the night. Wilson Odobert was sold for £30 million to Tottenham literally the next day and scored on that night. Zarori, no longer there. Veghorst, no longer there. McNally, no longer there. Scott Twine on the bench as well that night, no longer there. So yeah, stripped apart. Look, they replaced those players with some fantastic players as well. Fleming, obviously, 2 seasons ago was fantastic at Millwall. Scored an absolute worldie as well today. But players like Sami Ento came in, good players at championship level, relatively good attackers. You maybe question output, but flary wingers can sometimes pull the wool over eyes of fans, and you think, yeah, he's a really good player because he's tricky, can have the beating of most fullbacks.
I think what's frustrated me, and sorry to interrupt again, Nathan. I see people talking about, don't be reactive on social media. Don't be reactive about the results. And look, I'm not being reactive. And also I want to stress that I'm not saying that Middlesbrough deserve to be in the top two, because when you start like Middlesbrough have this season, you don't deserve to be within a few points of the top two or the top three. But are we really kind of making these points about teams in our division that are, so they're 4 points ahead of Blackburn Rovers? Have they got a super team or a super squad? They are
Blackburn Rovers with a game in hand as well, by the way.
with a game in hand. Yeah. Are we also making the same points about the squads of Sunderland? Come on.
Sunderland, yeah, again a team built on young players and do you want to know what as well? Academy graduates as well in their team. Obviously, that Watson had come in and was performing really well before he's been injured. And look, I don't want to be totally sort of derogatory about certain teams in the division. Luke O'Nien is captain of Sunderland.
It's not. Do you know what? It's honestly Sunderland again, a little bit in a similar kind of breath to Sheffield United. Their starting team is very good, and they do have some good young players. But Blackburn, again, look, they come to our place, they won the game, the goal was offside, but by no means am I saying that they're a bad side or that they don't deserve to be where they are. But the whole revisionism around Middlesbrough and the fact that playoffs would be, by all means acceptable, but top two was always a pipe dream. I'm just not on board with it at all. And I'm almost frustrated and sick of seeing people kind of like almost just wish the likes of Burnley, Leeds, Sheffield United, and Sunderland off on their sort of fairy tale like set sail and go and HMS piss the league. Don't get me wrong, 8 points is absolutely an absolute mountain to climb. And do I expect us to do it? No. But that's our fault. That's nothing to do with our squad. It's just the fact that we couldn't seem to find any kind of blend of attacking talent to get past the likes of Derby, Portsmouth, Preston in the opening games of the season. That's no one else's fault. But this whole revisionism, goodness me. And
Yeah,
yes, off the back of yesterday as well, and I'll get onto it. And I promised, you know what? I woke up this morning in a fighting kind of spirit of, I feel quite positive about Middlesbrough. We've gone and won ugly yesterday. And actually, I've said it multiple times. It's all right going to Oxford and scoring 6. You've got to win scruffy, ugly, scrappy games against the likes of Millwall that are going to come and make it difficult. And I'm still seeing people kind of picking holes in the performance and saying we weren't good enough. We weren't great, but you've got to win football matches like that.
100%. They are the ones where I think I said it to you yesterday that those are the games in which you won't remember anything about the game. All you'll see when you look back at the season is we won. We won that game. And that's it. It's a forgettable game, but you get your 3 points, and that's just no one remembers you
It's just plus
scrapping.
three in it. It's
Yeah,
just plus three. That's all it is.
+3. Forget about Millwall and their horrible grey kit and the 90 fans that they bring to the Riverside that issue a horrible droning moo for 90 minutes and you just move on. And now we're thinking about the future already. We're thinking about Christmas footy, and you just get all that out of the way. But anyway, we will sort of discuss the game, which was, as mentioned, a scrappy one. There wasn't a whole lot between the two sides. Look, we gave them an opportunity early on with Langstaff. Solbrin, as we mentioned, came into the side, makes a really, really important save early on in the game. And then literally 2 minutes later, we run up the other end and score our own chance, which is comes from Hackney in midfield, playing it into Lath. Bang, one touch to Azaz, bang, round the corner. And as mentioned, look, depends on your quality of opposition, but some people maybe thinking Murray Wallace could clear this one away, having watched it on replays time and time again. I think it does look like he's relatively close to clearing it away. Finds a way through. Lath, one touch out of his feet, bang, hits the target through Jensen's legs. Doesn't matter how they're going. He apparently my dad made the point yesterday that he felt quite confident going into the game that had Latilat got one of those chances, he would stick it away. Because I do sit with you before the game, but we weren't watching the warm up all too much yesterday. Apparently, Latilat was on absolute flames in the warm up, just hitting, striking the ball dead clean, hitting the target every single time. And in this instance, look, it's not right in the corner, in off the post. It's straight through the keeper's legs, in the back of the net, and that's all that matters. You scrappy games that isn't isn't one for the neutral where you think, yeah, top game that I'd want to watch. You just got to come out on the right result, the right end of the result, and we've done that.
Yeah, absolutely. And obviously, initially you spoke about Solbrin in terms of him coming into the team, and absolutely the correct decision for me. I think you almost think of the games that Solbrin had in the team, and unfortunately, when you've got two keepers that are kind of competing with each other, and like you said in the last podcast, going into this weekend, and since Dieng's return to the team, if it was going to be Solbrin's time to come back into the team, and funnily enough, I did say in last week's podcast, wouldn't shock me at all if Solbrin finished the season as the number one. I think he is the number one now, to be honest. It's come sooner than I expected, but obviously that was prior to Leeds. But we knew what Solbrin was about. We'd seen enough of him in terms of those 3 or 4 games that he had during Dieng's absence. And we know that Solbrin, I feel in terms of when he's in goal, he is a more imposing figure. I think from crosses, he looks a lot more confident. There was even a moment in the kind of dying embers of yesterday, and I never really felt like we were under like sort of significant pressure, but it's just that of a Middlesbrough fan. You almost expect one to kind of hit someone on the arse and go in and will chuck 2 points away. But cross come into the box the last few minutes of the game yesterday, and Solbrin just comes and claims it. And that alone is probably a tick in the box of Solbrin as opposed to Seny Dieng, because in that moment, I'm not going to lie, I feel like it's the exact type of cross where Seny Dieng would just come out and punch it. And he's not a bad puncher at all, but just to take off that pressure and just to get up high, claim the cross, and just fall straight onto the ball, it takes so much pressure off. As you say yesterday, in terms of being a big presence in the goal, Langstaff has the opportunity where Edmondson gets his kind of, I don't really know what he's trying to do. He's sort of losing his footing and just prods the ball back to the goalkeeper, doesn't get enough on it. And obviously, Bryn makes a good save. Even after 1-0, Aziz then has a one-on-one, and Solbrin again comes out. I think Maddo described it as Schmeichel like on BBC Tees. I wouldn't quite go that far, but makes himself that big, imposing figure, puts the attacker off, putting it round him, and it's another great save. And ultimately, okay, Latilat stuck the ball in the back of the net, but it's 2 gilt edge opportunities for Millwall to win the game, and Solbrin's prevented 2 goals. Now, look, I know I spoke last week about I don't want to kind of get drawn into what would Seny Dieng do in that position, but I actually feel like when in my head now, if I was to think in terms of coming and claiming crosses, you'd give Bryn the nod. In terms of a one-on-one, making yourself big, and the reflex element of getting down and trying to smother a ball or diving at a striker's feet, you'd probably give Bryn the nod over Dieng. Distribution, I actually think Bryn's distribution is okay, to be fair. Dieng, probably a little bit calmer, possibly a little bit more technically gifted. Look, I think now what I would say is, just lastly on the goalkeepers, Bryn's come back into the team now. The last thing that I want to happen is a Luke Daniels and Joe Lumley situation where they're both at a similar level. They're both kind of making errors, but then you begin to chop and change. If Bryn is going to come into the team, which he has done now, and I don't, because Carrick's very much, or for the most part, not so much this season, but usually it's quite hard to kind of play yourself out of his team. Once you're in his team, if you don't do anything drastic, you're usually going to stay in there. What the defence as a unit and what the goalkeeping department needs now is for Solbrin to go and have a run of 5 or 6 games, regardless of what happens. because you can't get yourself, in terms of a team that want to be in and around the playoffs, you can't get yourself in a position where you're chopping and changing the goalkeeper each week because it just disrupts the back line. In terms of the back line, Ralph Vandenberg. I'm being out there and making statements on this podcast. I'm gonna say right now, Rav Vandenberg will go on to achieve as much as any other Middlesbrough player that's pulled on a red shirt in the past 15, 20 years. And he'll probably be our record sale. And he is as good of a youngster as I have ever seen pull on a Middlesbrough shirt. That man, or that boy, he probably still falls into that category because of his age, is an absolute Rolls Royce of a central defender.
Yeah, he was good yesterday, wasn't he? Coming back into the team after 2 months or so out, like he's never been away, and a lovely surprise as well.
Yeah,
For
yeah.
the team sheet, there was no sort of inkling that he was going to be back in the side, and I sort of heard a murmur 5 minutes before the team sheet had come out, and I messaged you, and I think your reply was 2 words, 7 letters. And yeah, he was in the team. And do you want to know what? Yeah, he was top draw, won everything, stepping out from the back and playing into midfield as well. Just calm and composed when Millwall playing balls into the channel. Composed, making the right decisions. There was one in the first half where he sort of fakes to go back to Bryn and then just sort of turns, drives with the ball forward and plays it into midfield. I just thought, yeah, he's the real deal.
In, ter-
And
in terms of him progressing the ball, and I know we joke about it sometimes in terms of, oh, well, he does it with a little bit more aura, so he's better than Edmondson at doing it, but it's just, it is literally one of those occasions where I watch him and I just think I just want to savour every moment whilst you're in a Middlesbrough shirt, because we're not going to get long of him being here. Let's be honest. It's the harsh reality. Unless we go up this season, I'd be amazed if he's at the club next year. He is by far and away, like I say, in terms of his defensive actions, in terms of his age, he's one of those players. And God, touch wood, where I'm going to say this, and not like last podcast where I've praised Dan Barlaser at the hilt and said, I think we're finally seeing the proper Dan Barlaser. And then he goes and drops a Leeds performance. But in terms of Rav Vandenberg, I watch him and there's never any part of me really which thinks you're going to make an error here, or you're going to lose this header, or even if you do lose the first ball, you'll win the second one and recover. He is just phenomenal. He is. Look, I think we had our say in terms of the fan panel in the Gazette a few weeks ago, without doubt, and I'll use the phrase again, the absolute jewel in the crown of Kieran Scott's signings at Middlesbrough Football Club. He is sensational.
yeah, top draw. And I thought yesterday as well, given the game, given the nature of it, scrappy, horrible, not the most pleasing game to watch that I've ever seen at the Riverside. Johnny Howson in midfield again yesterday. It was a proper sort of Johnny Howson game where you need a bit of grit,
Yeah.
guile in midfield, and that's what Johnny Howson's all about. And do you want to know what as well? Another one who I think we missed in midweek and who I thought actually yesterday as well. I'd seen some things on Twitter, one post saying that people were like being critical in the ground of him, and I was like, I don't know how after the performance, but Bergzorg, I thought that he was fantastic yesterday, yet again, driving with the ball in moments where we were sort of under it a little bit, and he'd get the ball, sort of burst past one or two players, and either deliver a cross into the box or win a foul and just sort of settle us down. And like even in the sort of final minutes of the game in stoppage time, I think Conway played a ball over the top for him. And I can see from our view in the West Stand, he's absolutely
Dead
blown.
on his feet.
Yeah, he's done. He's given absolutely everything. You can see that he's out really. and he's made his way to the ball. I can't actually remember how the action ends up. Obviously, not in a goal or anything special. But at full time, just seeing him collapse to the floor and just laying on the turf, I just thought, yeah, you have put a right shift in today. And do you want to know what? There was a lot of them that were laid out, and they gave credit in their the post match interviews and reaction to Millwall as well for making them work for it, and they did. It was a very gritty, horrible, just generally crap championship game that, as mentioned, you just have to fall on the right side of it and pick your moments where your quality will shine through. And we did that. Like Elath puts the chance away, 3 points on the board. It's a forgettable game. No one will even think about it when we get to February and March time. But it's one of those where you'll probably look back at the end of the season if you finish a couple of like maybe 2 or 3 points inside the playoffs and you think, yeah, that was one that we had to graft for, and that's the difference that we were able to edge those games out to teams that may miss out. Those are the important ones.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And I think it was really telling yesterday that Michael Carrick stressed both in the written press and also the radio when he spoke to BBC Tees that that was one of his favourite wins of the season. And I think that, as I say, it's really telling because I'd quite happily say a few more of those. Look, I'm not under any illusion saying that I'm not trying to kid anyone or kid myself and say that it was a good performance because it wasn't. But over a 46 game season, you can't play well every game. I'd sooner rather do that and slog it out than be wonderful on the eye and have 70% possession and have 16 chances and lose the game 1-0 or draw the game 0-0. And like you say, we have players in games that can give you that one moment of quality. Fortunately, Latilaf puts that chance away into the back of the net. Again, like you say, I thought Azaz was actually really quiet from his recent standards, but comes away with an assist, so you can only ask that of him. And yeah, I think yesterday was more so the real performances where I thought, yeah, okay, other than Bryn obviously makes the two standout saves, where I thought actually, and it wasn't just this, but a large kind of if you were going to do sort of 3-2-1 stars of the performances or stars of the game from a Middlesbrough perspective, Bryn falls into the three because of the saves. Bergsorg, tireless effort from him, but ball carrying. Like I said, in terms of the Leeds performance, sometimes you think of Riley McGree and you think of a player that kind of reduces pressure in a different manner. He keeps the ball, he makes good decisions usually, and he'll recycle possession or pick himself up in a good pocket to receive the ball and then kind of just keep it, making good decisions. Bergsorg yesterday was really good at, like you say, beating one or two, and then even if he didn't get a shot off or a cross off, he would just beat one or two, slow things down, but not kill the attack completely. Just take a few players out of the game and then get his head up and pick a pass. At the start of the season, like we discussed after the Oxford game, when he'd just after that Luton performance, and he had quite a similar performance at Oxford, although he didn't score, really one of the standouts on that day. And how many times earlier on this season, even coming off the bench, did we see him do similar things to what he did yesterday, but then get into a position where he could get a shot off and he just hit the defender time in, time out, and it is so infuriating. But yet again, you've got to kind of give the recruitment team a little bit of praise. By all accounts, I'm sure half of the division, probably 90% of the division. In fact, you know what? 95% of the division probably looked at the signing, Middlesbrough signing Delano Bergsorg, and thought, what on earth are they doing? And probably 99% of the Huddersfield fan base probably thought the same. I think you asked the question when we were linked initially before he was announced. And I mean, you can go back and read that thread of comments from Huddersfield fans. His ego, his end product is just how wasteful he is. One of the worst kind of, well, not players, not technically, but one of the worst individuals we've had pull on a town shirt and all this nonsense. And to be fair, look, we're going to need a few more performances to really, really make our minds up. But you're seeing obvious signs of Delano Bergsog where you think, again, it's a complete different option, but it's a little bit of a masterstroke from the recruitment team because he gives you something completely different, a different dynamic, a different skill set to what other profiles in that attacking line do. And actually, in fairness to him, for someone that we joke about and we say his attitude and his kind of like his own hashtag and don't get me wrong, he does have a bit of an ego, but I quite like that about him. But he works really hard. He actually does work really hard. And like you say yesterday, he was dead on his feet. And I must admit, he's made that. And I think the biggest praise I can give him in terms of me being a Riley McGree fan, he has made that position on the left his own at the moment. Even if Riley McGree's fit, I think Bergsog starts until he plays himself out of form or picks up a knock. Riley McGree's struggling to get back into the team at the moment. So there you go, Nathan. As high as the praise as what you could possibly ever imagine coming from Chris Casti.
Yeah, and the thing is as well with Bergzog is I know as we mentioned we talk about his ego and we laugh about his social media, but you can tell he cares. And
Oh
that
yeah,
that's massive. That is massive for a fan. Like I think that sort of it can be sort of laughed at a little bit.
it's almost like us against the world mentality.
Yeah, and
Well,
I'm
his bio on Instagram is it's the hate that fuels me or the hate that feeds me. Now, if he in his mind thinks that it's everyone in the world against him or everyone in the world against him and his 10 other teammates and whoever's on the bench and Michael Carrick and the coaching staff, I love it.
yeah,
I absolutely, he could become the ultimate cult hero. And I don't want him to just be a cult hero because he's got a funny Instagram. I want him to be because of performances like yesterday, where you can tell, as you say, he generally cares, but also he uses his attribute, his physicality. Millwall are a physical side, and in fairness to him, I'll give them a little bit of credit because I said you can copy and paste their performance. Yesterday, I thought they actually try to play a little bit, and possibly because they didn't have Coburn available. Obviously, they were never going to, but I don't know how they play when he was still fit and available. But they try to play a little bit, but they are still a very physical side. And Bergsorg knows he's got that flair and the odd flick and trick that's nice on the eye, but he's also got that side of him where he will bash people about, he will mix it up, and he will kind of throw his body in when he needs to and push people around. To be honest, as look, I'm not trying to be this like hipster, like, yeah, I'd rather grind out a 1-0 win and bite my nails for the last 10 minutes than stick six past someone. But yesterday, I come away with more positives yesterday than what I did after Hull because I thought we've shown a side to us. And when we spoke about isolating the result at Burnley, but when you isolate a result like that, or sorry, don't isolate, when you pair the Burnley performance and that performance, look, some people go to football for different reasons, but in terms of just grinding out 3 points, I love that side of things. I love that we've shown in the last few games, admittedly, Leeds has come in the middle, so it's hard to make this point, but if we want to be there or thereabouts, then we have to do that side of things, and it's a side of us it's almost new to fans because we haven't seen that side of us really this season, other than perhaps Sheffield United, West Brom. It's very limited times that you've seen that type of performance.
yeah, and they are the types of performances that you need if you are going to be successful in this division. Sheffield United will have done it at times this season where they've had to slog it out in daft conditions, and you just try to come out on the right side of the result, as I've said. And next week presents us with another opportunity to do just that. The furthest trip of the season might as well be France. I think we've said this the last 2 seasons. Plymouth Argyle away. Sorry, let me rephrase. I mean, look, there might be a change in the week, but for now, Wayne Rooney's Plymouth Argyle away from home next week at Home Park on the south coast. And yeah, I'm going to be totally honest. This is a game where if you want to be anywhere near playoffs, you have to go there with the objective of 3 points. And do you want to know what? I think the first goal, it's cliche, first goal's massive. If you get it, I think you're in for an afternoon where you could probably get a couple because they'll have to open up a bit. But something that I will mention is the difference between home and away form
Yeah.
for certain sides. And the worst team in the league away from home is Plymouth. They've played 11, won none, drew two, and lost nine. And they've scored 3 goals away from home all season and conceded 29. Now, if you sort of change that and look at the home form, 9 games played at home, won 4, drawn 3, and lost 2, and they've scored 16 and only conceded 13. So goes to show that they are miles better at home in their. I think that it'll be interesting if this was sort of a possible thing that could be investigated for miles travelled to certain away grounds because the teams that they have beaten at home as well, Sunderland, they beat in September 3-2 tight game. Luton, which was okay, yeah, side struggling down the bottom of the league. Blackburn, they beat, and Portsmouth. Now, other sides in that as well, the two that do stand out are the games that they've been beaten at home. Swansea, who they're okay, they're in the top half, they're doing all right, and Stoke, who are drab. So my total sort of point in this is I think they get up for games that are either live on Sky, 2 of them were that they won, or if the sides that they're playing up against are they know they are like a sort of level above with Blackburn and Sunderland going there. Maybe a question of raising the game there. And we saw it last season. Look, okay, they've had managerial changes since then, and also personnel changes. We took Azaz off them for
Yeah.
one in the game down at their place. 3-3 draw last season, very end to end. And I remember coming on this podcast last season after that game thinking, how haven't we won that game? We've conceded one worldie from Azaz, a cross that went all the way in from Whitaker. And okay, the other one from Mumba was fairly well worked. But just yeah, the conditions played a part that day. Hopefully, this is one where Boro can just grind it out. I can imagine it'll be horrible right before Christmas. Mission to get down there. Fingers crossed for 3 points just before Christmas.
Yes, thank you ever so much for watching and listening again, everyone. Please do rate and review on your audio platforms, as well as subscribing and liking on YouTube. And that has been another episode of the Boropolis podcast.